Hi, friends. I'm super excited to be with you here for another Speaking of Her conversation. Today, we are chatting with Tameka Montgomery from Core Strategy Partners and also Naomi D Brown from Her Corner, who you may or may not know. And I'm just super excited to have you all back. So, we typically start these things with the big question of like, who are you? What is your story? How did you get to where you are? Maybe what are some surprising things about it? And so let's just jump right in. Tameka, who are you? How did you get
Yeah,
here?
yeah. So who am I? I'm a mom. First of all, I'm a mom to three teenage boys. So so I'm probably frazzled and something's always on my mind. But
You
uh
get an award just for that.
Yes.
yes, and a wife and a business owner, right? So all of those things. And so that's kind of core of who I am, honestly. It drives all of my decisions, being a wife, a mother, and a business owner, consumes my day to day. But kind of going a little bit deeper, and I'm a Spelman grad. Okay, a
I was
Spelman
gonna
alum.
say, if you
Let
don't
me,
say it,
yeah,
I will.
yes. So
Totally by accident. Just let everybody know I was attracted to your information and what you do prior to knowing that, but
yeah.
it just icing on the cake.
Yes, yes. Which, yeah, it is. Yeah, it is crazy. It is crazy. But it's funny because um I'm the CEO of Core Strategy Partners, and we are a social impact research and strategy company. So we work with mission-driven leaders, helping them develop strategies and programs that are evidence-based, and primarily are focused on the areas around kind of economic mobility and community impact. And when people hear this, like, oh, wow, gosh, how'd you get into that? And, what led you down that path? And it's so interesting how life takes you, because I'm at a point where my middle son is about to enter college. He's about to graduate high school. And I went to Spelman, I was an English major. Which is so different, to where my professional career actually went.
Mm,
Um, and so I started Core Strategy Partners after completing um, a stint as a presidential appointee at the U.S. Small Business Administration. So I was appointed by President Obama to oversee all of the entrepreneurship programs for the entire nation. So if
Yeah, she just goes over that like I'm
oh my
appointed by
gosh.
President Obama to do this.
Uh,
Yeah, I didn't lead with that, Maggie. Sorry.
yeah,
Girl,
yeah,
way
yeah.
to bury the lead.
Yeah. So yeah, so if you've ever heard of like the small business development centers, women's business centers, SCORE mentoring program, emerging
Absolutely.
leaders, just any of those kind of training programs that the SBA supports through partners across the United States, I led those programs from 2013 to 2017. But before leading those programs, I actually ran the Denver Metro Small Business Development Center for 7 years. In 2012, it was named the number one in the nation. And then prior to running the Denver Metro SBDC, I started back in 2001. I started one of Denver's very first small business incubators. So now, you hear about incubators and accelerators. This is 2026. It's very common, but back in 2001, I remember when people were like, what's an incubator? And I remember the example. I say, okay, think of an egg, and an egg incubates incubator incubates an egg in its early stages. And it's the same with small businesses. They're vulnerable and I have my whole little kind of description of helping people understand this concept of an incubator. Um, so yeah, so I started one of Denver's first incubators in a 26,000 square foot facility. We got it renovated. I secured the tenants, developed the programming, and then from there went on to lead the Small Business Development Center for 7 years, and then got recruited to run all of the programs for the nation. So it's funny to me because, like I said, I was an English major in college. So it's kind of interesting that, that is kind of where I've landed. But I've always been kind of socially minded in the work that I do. always cared about impact. And I think, I always think like, how did I end up in this entrepreneurship space? Why has this been the space in terms of supporting individuals in their entrepreneurial journey? And the thing that I guess the only thing I can maybe attribute it to is I just remember growing up when I was my mom, single mom, um, high school diploma only, and she had like this little side gig, and she used to sell like little trinkets for the house, and but she had it set up a little kind of like a stand that was inside a supper club, like a club, right? So it's a club, you walk in, you get your ticket for your Coke, and then my mom had her little trinkets and stuff. And so that was her little side business, and it just kind of stayed as that for the most part. But I would help her with that. And so I believe that perhaps, her business never actually grew to the point where it could really sustain us as a family. I mean, it was always like a side thing,
Supplement,
adding a
yeah.
little bit extra. And I believe perhaps maybe that's why I ended up in this space. I mean, I that's the only reason. I don't know. But I care about economic mobility for folk.
Yeah.
I believe in the power that it has the potential to deliver. But unfortunately, at the same time, I feel like entrepreneurship for a lot of women and people of color, it never actually hits that point of being a true wealth creator and generator.
Mm.
Um, and that is something that's a challenge.
And I want to get a little bit deeper into this because I think we're already sort of at a perfect segue. But you wrote this really great report on sort of the things that women and minority owned businesses are facing. And
Mhm.
I was wondering if you could, I mean, listen, you outlined a few challenges, right? Like I was wondering if you could start by just outlining the challenges that these businesses are facing,
Mhm.
and sort of give us an overview of what your findings were.
Yeah, thank you for that. Yeah, I was having conversations. What kind of led to this was I was having conversations with economic development leaders, kind of from different communities across the area. And one of the things, amongst many that they were dealing with, kind of with the whiplash of everything, all the policy changes and all of that was happening, they also kind of talked about what was happening to their local small businesses. And then on top of it, just seeing all of kind of the changes, policy changes happening, with the 8A program and who can qualify or how you qualify to be involved in the SBA 8A program, and just a number of things. I was like, you know what, let me do a quick survey of women and minority business owners. So we just did a quick pulse survey to understand how women and minority owned businesses are faring in this current economic and political environment. A lot of the businesses that we surveyed were from the kind of DC metro area. So I think that the findings are more reflective of businesses kind of in those areas. But we titled the report from based on all the findings, we titled the report 8 Years to Build and 9 months to destroy. And I like to point that out because what it points out is that we weren't just talking to startups, or the people who were responding on the email on the survey weren't just startups. These were established businesses who had been around for a while, so they had bypassed some early stage hurdles that occur with trying to get your business off the ground.
Mhm.
But because of all the things that were happening, some of them were just seeing their businesses wiped out within 9 months of, when we look at last year. Um, so in terms of the these businesses, most of them were operating in the professional services space, and many of them were um, operating also in the federal marketplace or were considering to participate in the federal marketplace because, like I said, this is the environment that we are in this area. But some of the key findings was that we saw, it's interesting because, like I said, it's women and minority business owners. And so we saw kind of overall just the impact. And then when we kind of separated out and cross tabulated, looking at people who were women only, who identified as women only versus women and minority, like kind of
Mm,
what issues are
yes.
happening there. And so
Wow.
one of the questions we asked about was around revenue decreases. How has your revenue been impacted? Everyone, both, all the group said that they saw revenue declines. However, women only talked about a 42% of them um, shared that they experienced revenue declines, whereas those who identified as both minority and women, it was 53.8. So nearly 54% of them had experienced revenue decline,
Ugh.
decreased. So then, we asked about their interest in federal contracting because when I was at SBA, I would go around and we talk, even when I was at SBDC, the idea is that becoming a federal contractor through programs like the 8A is an opportunity, a marketing opportunity, a marketing vehicle that can open up the opportunity to secure the world's largest customer, right? So the potential that one might have in exponentially growing your business when you get involved in 8A and become a federal contractor is tremendous and potentially. And so we asked people about their interest in going into that federal market space. And what we heard back was women only, people who identify as women only, 56.8% of them said that they had decreased interest in going into the federal market space, whereas those who identified as women and minority, it was 67% of them saying that they were no longer interested in pursuing federal contracting work. And, when we dig a little deeper into their response, it's really about not seeing that place as supportive. So
Right.
81% of women and minority business owners view the current climate as unsupportive, whereas women only, it was 69% of them see it as so it's just interesting. I mean, it's
And you're,
indicative of what we see all the time when it
yeah,
comes
and
to
and you're
data.
obviously the researcher, but I would, if I had taken that survey, I agree with that. And I think that reason being of the lack of support is because the return on your investment of time and energy, right? Like if I don't have the support, I'm not gonna see my ROI, and I have to decide where I'm going to put that. And I think one of the things that I try to share with other women business owners is, listen, to your point, it's a great opportunity to work for the federal government, but don't have all your eggs in one basket. And only reason why I'm standing in some of the other companies that we support or that I've seen is because of that, is because you pay attention, to those things and you want to be an expert in something. But being an expert in something, you still should consider diversifying because there's always environments that you cannot control, and
Mhm.
you want to put your business in, that in the best position possible. And in your report, that we are obviously going to share with everyone listening, I think one thing that really stood out to me, and I'm not sure, Maggie, if I'm jumping ahead or you were going to ask this question, is there are multiple things happening at the same time, right? Most of us as business owners are used to political environments, economic environments, some of the things that, change as a result of whatever is going on. I think that this past year or two has been particularly challenging because it was all of those things at the same time. It wasn't just
Mm,
one thing. There were multiple things that were happening And similar to COVID, where maybe people caught COVID at the beginning of the season, and some people didn't catch COVID till June or December.
Oh yeah.
So it was like always, always
Yeah.
impacting someone. And then there was some impact later on that people received. So, the information and the data that you shared definitely resonated with me, and which is why I felt like showing it. And then I also saw, which you alluded to, that people didn't feel supportive, which is why they're choosing groups like Her Corner or some of the other women's organizations of their peers, because that is where it's closer. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like, I definitely feel like even if you didn't help me, you understand me because you're doing exactly what I am doing, or in my similar shoes. And that just helps you to know that you're not alone. And, there are some things to do about it. And I also liked in your report, which is, I think, kind of why this is important right now, is that we are discussing what can be done about it. It's not just a doom and gloom of like, this is the state and this is where we are, but that it's also, so here are some ways that we can combat this. And you can make decisions. You can decide, do you want to continue as an entrepreneur in this space? Do you want to go to a different space? Do you want to do less of it? Because it's not just black and white. I think sometimes, we think, oh, this is happening, so let's shut down. Some people have to shut
Mhm.
down as a business
Right.
decision, right? But sometimes it's just let me pivot, let me,
Yeah.
make some adjustments. And I think that
Mhm.
that allows us to
Yeah.
research this intelligently. So,
Yeah. Yeah, it does, in terms of how much of your business is in one area, it does require you to kind of step back and see how you can diversify your revenue pathways, your client base. Um, I do think that for some people who, and I was talking to a business owner just the other day who had 6 of his federal contracts canceled because of this. And so
that's not
Oh,
good.
now what we're seeing is, those federal contractors are moving into state and local, going after state and local opportunities, right? They have the past performance, they're positioned well to do well potentially in those spaces. So being able to make those pivots quickly. Yeah, it's not a time for us to panic or get discouraged. And because
mhm.
here's the truth of the matter, this is how I feel.
Mhm.
Systems work the way they are designed to work. And
That's right.
so, when it's hard, it's because it was
Absolutely.
designed to be hard,
Absolutely.
you know.
Yes.
And I would even
I'm
say,
glad you said it.
Yes.
and I would even say, to be honest, like even kind of being back before all of this chaos kind of entered into the space, it's challenging just generally in general
Yeah.
trying to get into the federal marketplace, for example. It's just challenge. It's all of it. The corporate procurement space, government procurement. It's challenging for small businesses, even though all of them have their supplier diversity folks, and they have programming that's designed to support women and diverse suppliers. It still is very difficult, it's challenging. And so yeah, so it's like, look, this is just the reality of the space that we have to work in. It makes you upset to just see certain things, but we can't focus there. We got to get up, pick up our head, look at this and say, okay, how do I innovate? How do I re-strategize? How do I reset? And how do I pivot? And that's where the focus needs to be on. And how do we, with AI in area now, it's like we got to even think about how might we be leveraging this technology to help us in ways that we just hadn't really leaned on in the past, as well. So yeah,
Mhm.
that's the reality of this space.
So what did you find when you were chatting with folks about support groups,
Mhm.
everything, anything that comes to mind?
hmm Yeah, so we asked them actually, like, where do you go to get, who are your trusted advisors, And within that, we, included like SBDCs and, all of those kind of government funded programs. And what was interesting is that when they talked about their trusted advisors, they, their, they rated, kind of peer network groups higher than government funded technical
Technical.
assistance providers.
Wow.
And yeah, which, I mean, I get it because in some of those spaces, those resources are being cut tremendously. And so, some of them aren't reliable. But then the other piece of it is, I think, is that the people who did our survey were established businesses. And I just know personally from running a small business development center, those people who, when there are stages of business ownership, and when you are been in business for a while, you really value the expertise and the insights of people who have been there and done it for you.
Absolutely.
And you rely on those. You want to be in circles of other, I like to call them sister CEOs, who are in the trenches, they've done this, as opposed to someone who is primarily focused on helping people get off the ground and started. And so those peer networks of like-minded people, like experience, have similar lived experiences from a business ownership perspective, that's where people have the greatest level of confidence and are turning to more so for support. So,
Yeah, they're filling the information gap, right? And
Yeah.
the difference between good to great or water boiling or not is just a very small difference. But those little things that just close that gap and give information give tremendous confidence boosts to business owners, and particularly women business owners, where we think we know what we know. And most women know that they are particularly good at fill in the blank, whether that is being a mom, whether it is being a wife, whether it's being a single person who seems to have their things together, right? Like whatever that dynamic is, you may even just be like, I'm really good at the service that I offer, but not necessarily at running the business part of it or whatever
mhm.
that is. And so when we give each other information like this, one, you're not alone. And two, it really helps to give people that confidence and bridge the gap where, hey, it may work or not work, but you certainly are prepared as you go in to have these conversations, which, are critical. And it all starts from research like what you've provided. So we're super grateful.
So Saturday we were at Towson because one of my son has gotten accepted in there. So, it's kind of like a preview day. And so we were walking around and this young lady comes up to me. She's like, "Hey, did you start a program, a fair for, kids, years ago?" And I saw her, I was like, "Danielle," like I knew who she was immediately because she was I had had this podcast called Raising Entrepreneurs, and I had interviewed her, and she had won first place in one of those cooking shows, Cooked or something.
Yeah.
But it did it like Cooked for Kids, and she had won it. And she had
Oh,
started this little business where she created recipe cards for kids so they can know how to. And so then I had invited her my first year of doing my fair to be a volunteer judge. And so she saw me at this, and she graduated from college and everything, and she's working
crazy.
out in the world. But it was so good to just have that connect, from that was back in 2018 to where she is
Uh-huh.
now, and just the impact that she's having and the work that she's doing now. But yeah, it's just interesting to kind of see that full circle, and
Oh, it is
giving back.
I mean, as a teacher, this resonates so deeply in my heart. I mean, there's nothing, it's totally profound. I think when a student comes back and you see the things that they're doing,
Mhm,
and
mhm.
I have such hope and faith in this generation, the generation that your boys are a part of. I am so truly fond of them. I love them deeply, and it is like a great privilege to teach them, and it is an even greater privilege to learn from them. And so,
Yeah.
again, it's those linkages, those kinds of ripples where the ripple is now so far out that you don't feel it and you don't see it, but they do.
Yeah.
And that is just sublime.
Hmm.
Really, that is absolutely sublime. And
Yeah.
I think that Naomi and I could talk to you for 3 or 4 hours. And really, like, this has been an absolutely fantastic conversation. I we really appreciate your time and what it is that you're doing. Boss, did you want to have any sort of closing remarks before we wrap?
I would just say, I we use the term sister boss, and I can say it double sister, one of my big sisters that I have now. And yeah, no, I think as I mentioned before, I just want to reiterate the power of your research and how it's a foundation for us to make decisions, and the power of the work that you've done, and it just kind of coming full circle to helping out your children, what they're doing. But it did actually impact in things like explaining an incubator and having accelerator programs and, all that you see out now. I would challenge you a little bit about what's next, because I mean, you've been on the right track so far. So listen, I'm going to be listening to whatever Tameka Montgomery says because she's been right thus far. So whatever's next that she says, I want to be in there. Like, I'm like, oh, not insider trading, but just,
Yeah,
just
yeah,
a little heads up on
yeah.
what's going on.
Inside baseball. Inside
Right.
Listen,
baseball.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Like I just want to know like the trends. Like, okay, the future of like when these happen, the future of whatever. Okay,
Yeah.
let me look up core strategy partners for the
Yeah.
future of this and
Yeah, yeah,
find
yeah.
that out. So yeah, no, thank you very much. And we'll definitely be in touch. I'm sure we're gonna get a lot of questions, around this, and we'll be revisiting this topic again. And here's to hoping that this time next year we have a similar report and the outlook will be more promising.
Yeah, no, thank you. Thank you so much. It was a pleasure meeting you, Maggie, and chatting with you again, Naomi, is my Spelman sister. And so I look forward to staying connected.
We'll do. We'll be in touch. Thank you so much.
Okay, take care.
Bye bye.